Something shifted in the atmosphere around you, chosen one, and they felt it before they understood it. While you moved through your daily existence with the quiet grace of someone who has learned to carry lightning without burning themselves, others began to notice that the rules seemed different when you were present. What they couldn't comprehend was that they weren't dealing with an ordinary person anymore. They were encountering something far more dangerous to their plans than they had anticipated. The mistake they made was assuming your power resided only in what they could see. Your calm demeanor, your measured responses, the way you handled conflict with an almost unsettling peace, they interpreted these as weaknesses rather than the controlled expression of something vast, operating beneath the surface. Like children playing with shadows on a wall, they thought they understood the game until the light source itself turned around to face them. Behind closed doors, in whispered conversations and carefully orchestrated meetings, they began to plot, not against your physical form but against the very essence of what made you untouchable. They gathered in digital spaces and ancient practices, convinced that if they could just find the right combination of manipulation, spiritual interference and coordinated attack, they could diminish what made you different. What they discovered instead was that your spiritual rank operates on frequencies they had never encountered. What unfolded next would manifest through 7 distinct revelations, 7 moments of awakening that would transform not only your understanding of who you are, but their comprehension of what they had dared to challenge. Each revelation would strip away another layer of their illusions, while simultaneously unveiling more of your true spiritual authority. Your promotion came through not because you played their political games, but because something in you aligns with forces that recognize authentic power. Your relationships flourish not because you manipulated outcomes, but because your presence carries a resonance that draws genuine connection. Your financial breakthrough manifested not through their approved methods, but because abundance flows toward those who have learned to hold space for it without desperation, and this terrified them. The first revelation came dressed as coincidence. Projects you had worked on for months suddenly faced unprecedented scrutiny. Meetings you weren't invited to determined the future of initiatives you had pioneered. Conversations happened around you that carried the subtle energy of exclusion, designed to make you question your place and purpose. But instead of the doubt and insecurity they expected to see, you remained centered in a knowing that confused them even more. What they failed to understand was that every challenge they sent your way was actually activating dormant aspects of your spiritual authority. Each attempt to undermine your confidence was teaching you more about the true nature of your power. Each whispered conspiracy was revealing to you the desperate measures people take when they encounter something they cannot control or diminish through conventional means. The second revelation came through direct spiritual interference. They enlisted people who claimed to understand the unseen realms, who promised they could redirect the energy that seemed to flow so effortlessly around you. Rituals were performed with your name attached to intentions of confusion and limitation. Prayers were offered to entities whose primary function was to disrupt the natural order of divine favor. Energy was directed toward you with the specific purpose of creating chaos in your financial flow, your relationships, and your sense of purpose. But here's what they didn't anticipate. Your spiritual rank isn't something you achieved through human effort alone. It's recognition from forces that govern reality itself, and those forces do not respond kindly to interference. The very attempts to spiritually sabotage you became the catalyst for an awakening that elevated you beyond anything they could have imagined. Like trying to put out a fire with gasoline, their spiritual attacks only intensified the divine protection and favor that was already active in your life. The third revelation unfolded through workplace dynamics. The environment became a battlefield where the rules of engagement were invisible to most observers. While they saw meetings and performance reviews and project assignments, what was actually happening was a demonstration of 2 different operating systems attempting to coexist. Their system relied on scarcity, competition, and the belief that success required diminishing others. Your system operated from abundance, collaboration, and the understanding that genuine power creates more power for everyone in its vicinity. The discussions happening in break rooms and after-hours gatherings revealed the depth of their confusion and resentment. They gathered in small groups, analyzing every aspect of your approach, trying to reverse engineer the formula for your consistent success. These conversations always followed the same pattern: initial attempts to find logical explanations for your advantages, followed by increasingly desperate theories about unfair connections or hidden manipulation, and finally settling into bitter acceptance that something about your very presence changed the rules of how success operated in their environment. What frustrated them most was the way everything you touched seemed to transform into something more valuable than what you had started with. Projects that appeared routine when assigned to others became breakthrough innovations when you were involved. Relationships that remained purely transactional with them developed into lasting partnerships when you were present. Financial opportunities that others missed or mishandled naturally found their way to you and flourished under your stewardship. When the promotion they thought they had orchestrated away from you not only came through but exceeded what you had originally applied for, the confusion in their ranks became palpable. When the project they had sabotaged through behind-the-scenes maneuvering was not only salvaged but became the foundation for your next career breakthrough, they began to suspect they were dealing with something beyond their comprehension. The fourth revelation emerged through direct confrontation. Having failed through subtlety and spiritual manipulation, they decided to challenge you openly. Public criticism of your methods, questioning of your qualifications, attempts to embarrass you in group settings where they felt they had the advantage of numbers and social positioning. They expected to see you crumble under pressure, to watch your confidence erode when faced with direct opposition. Instead, they witnessed something that fundamentally altered their understanding of what they were up against. Your response to their attacks carried a quality of certainty that didn't match the situation as they understood it. You spoke with the authority of someone who knew something they didn't. You moved with the confidence of someone protected by forces they couldn't see. And most disturbing to them, you seemed almost compassionate toward their attempts to diminish you, as if you understood something about their motivations that they didn't understand themselves. This was the moment when the revelation began to dawn on them. They weren't dealing with someone who had gotten lucky or learned to play the game better than them. They were encountering someone whose very presence challenged the fundamental assumptions upon which their worldview was built. Someone whose spiritual rank operated from a completely different paradigm than anything they had experience with. The awakening that occurred in you during this period was like watching a flower bloom in fast forward. Each challenge they presented activated another layer of your spiritual discernment. Each attack they launched taught you more about the nature of your own protection. Each attempt to diminish your influence only clarified the true scope of your purpose and the divine backing that supported it. You began to understand that what they saw as your advantages in the physical realm, the promotion, the financial breakthrough, the respect from authority figures, the way opportunities seemed to seek you out, were actually the natural expression of spiritual realities they couldn't perceive. Your material success wasn't the source of your power, it was simply the visible manifestation of invisible truths about your identity and purpose that were finally being revealed through external circumstances. The fifth revelation came through organizational recruitment attempts. Having failed to diminish you through individual effort, they began to organize others who shared their resentment and confusion about your seemingly effortless success. Group discussions emerged about the unfairness of your advantages, the questionable nature of your achievements, and the need for collective action to level what they perceived as an uneven playing field. But something unexpected happened when they tried to build consensus against you. People who they thought would join their cause began to express different perspectives. Colleagues started sharing stories about how your presence had positively impacted their own work and well-being. Supervisors mentioned improvements in team dynamics and productivity that coincided with your involvement in projects. Even some of those who had initially been receptive to their complaints began to question whether their perception of unfairness was accurate. The recruitment effort backfired because it forced people to consciously consider the actual impact of your presence in their environment. When they moved beyond jealousy and resentment to examine the facts, what emerged was a picture of someone whose success was actually creating more success for others. Your spiritual rank wasn't operating through competition or domination, but through a form of influence that elevated the entire ecosystem around you. This realization created the first cracks in their coalition. Some began to distance themselves from the more aggressive opposition efforts. Others started to wonder if they had misunderstood the situation entirely. A few even began to consider whether aligning with you rather than against you might be a more intelligent strategy for their own advancement and well-being. The sixth revelation brought them to desperation. Having exhausted conventional methods of opposition and spiritual interference, they reached for tactics that revealed the true depth of their spiritual poverty. Anonymous complaints to authorities about your conduct, attempts to create legal complications for your business interests, spreading of false information designed to damage your reputation, and efforts to turn your closest associates against you through manufactured conflicts and misunderstandings. The retracting began almost immediately. Statements they had made with confidence started being walked back with nervous explanations. Accusations they had leveled with certainty were quietly withdrawn with mumbled apologies about misunderstandings. The boldness they had displayed when they thought they were winning transformed into desperate attempts to distance themselves from actions they had proudly claimed just days earlier. Like shadows fleeing from sudden light, they scrambled to deny their participation in schemes that everyone had witnessed them orchestrating. Their attempts to escape the consequences of their spiritual warfare created a cascade of exposure that revealed the full scope of their coordinated efforts. Private conversations were disclosed by participants seeking to minimize their own liability. Digital communications surfaced that documented their planning and collaboration. Financial records emerged showing payments made for services that could only be described as attempts to spiritually and professionally sabotage your advancement. The very secrecy they had counted on for protection became the source of their most damaging revelations. This was when your spiritual rank revealed its most formidable aspect. Not only were these attacks ineffective, they began to backfire with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. The false complaints led to investigations that actually highlighted your exemplary conduct and resulted in recognition from the very authorities they had hoped would constrain you. The legal complications they attempted to create became the catalyst for connections with advocates and advisors who elevated your professional standing. The reputation damage they tried to orchestrate became opportunities for you to demonstrate your character in ways that attracted even more respect and support. Most remarkably, their attempts to turn your closest associates against you became the foundation for even deeper trust and loyalty. When people saw how you responded to betrayal and false accusations with grace, wisdom, and an unwavering commitment to truth, they understood they were in relationship with someone whose integrity operated from a source that couldn't be corrupted by external pressure. The pattern became undeniable even to your opponents. Every action they took against you was being transformed into an advantage for you. Every door they tried to close was opening two more in unexpected directions. Every relationship they attempted to damage was becoming stronger and more authentic. They were inadvertently becoming instruments of your elevation rather than your limitation. The seventh and final revelation brought understanding not just to you but to them. The more sophisticated among your opponents began to understand that they had fundamentally misread the situation from the beginning. What they had interpreted as luck, manipulation, or unfair advantage was actually the natural expression of someone operating from a different spiritual frequency altogether. Your success wasn't taking anything away from them because success itself worked differently in your presence. This understanding divided their ranks permanently. Some continued in their opposition, driven more by pride and sunk costs than by any realistic hope of success. Others began a careful withdrawal from the conflict, hoping to minimize the damage to themselves while avoiding further escalation. A few actually approached you directly, seeking to understand how they might access the same sources of favor and protection that seemed to surround you so naturally. Your response to these different approaches demonstrated the true nature of your spiritual rank. To those who continued in opposition, you offered no resistance but also no access to your energy or attention. They became irrelevant to your trajectory rather than obstacles to overcome. To those who withdrew, you offered the grace of forgotten conflicts and fresh starts, understanding that wisdom sometimes requires retreat from untenable positions. To those who approached with genuine curiosity and humility, you offered mentorship and guidance, recognizing that your spiritual rank carried responsibility for lifting others who were ready to receive higher understanding. The transformation that followed extended far beyond the original conflict. Your workplace, your social circles, your professional networks all began to reflect the frequency you carried. People who operated from scarcity, manipulation, and spiritual poverty found themselves naturally selecting out of your environment, not through your rejection, but through their own discomfort with frequencies they couldn't match. Those who resonated with abundance, integrity, and spiritual growth found themselves naturally drawn into your sphere of influence. The enlightenment that had been forced upon your opponents through their failed attacks created a strange phenomenon in your environment. Some who had witnessed their humiliation began approaching you with a mixture of fear and fascination, like people who had seen lightning strike and wanted to understand the storm. They carried questions they were afraid to ask directly. How had you remained so calm during attacks that would have destroyed their careers? How had every weapon turned against you become a tool for your advancement? How had your very presence begun changing the rules by which success and failure operated in spaces they thought they understood? The atmosphere around you became charged with an energy that was palpable to everyone who entered your sphere of influence. Meetings you attended took on a different quality, with participants finding themselves speaking more truthfully and collaboratively than usual. Projects you touched seemed to attract unexpected resources and support from sources no one could have predicted. Even your casual conversations carried a weight that left people feeling both challenged and inspired long after the interaction had ended. This awakening in others revealed that your spiritual rank carried teaching authority alongside its protective and creative power. People began seeking your guidance not just on professional matters, but on how to operate from the same unshakable foundation they had witnessed in you during crisis. They wanted to understand how favor worked, how divine timing operated, how someone could move through opposition with such certainty and grace. Your responses to these inquiries became seeds that would grow into transformation throughout your entire sphere of influence. The promotion you received during this period wasn't just advancement within existing structures, but the creation of entirely new opportunities that better reflected your true capabilities and purpose. The financial breakthrough that manifested wasn't just an increase in income, but the opening of revenue streams that aligned with your values and vision. The relationships that flourished weren't just improvements in existing connections, but the formation of partnerships and alliances that could support the larger work you were being called to accomplish. Your opponents watched this transformation with a mixture of awe and despair. Everything they had predicted would result from their interference. Your isolation, failure, and diminishment had manifested in their own lives instead. They found themselves marginalized in environments where they had once held influence. They experienced financial and professional setbacks that seemed to mirror the very difficulties they had tried to create for you. Most painfully, they witnessed the cost of opposing someone whose spiritual rank operated from divine favor rather than human manipulation. Hold that thought for a moment. I need your attention for something very important. We're revealing everything we know about personal power, healing yourself and healing others through weekly Zoom call. No filters, no holding back. We have been quietly adding all the occult secrets we've collected over literal years of spiritual practice. The techniques and wisdom that transformed us from controlled pawns into conscious creators are now available to those ready to walk the same path. This is your invitation to join Obsidian Inner Order and support our platform so we can continue growing our megaphone to reach other chosen ones waiting for activation. By joining the Obsidian Inner Order, you're not just gaining access to forbidden knowledge, you're becoming part of a movement that's rewriting reality itself. It's a 360 win for all of us. Link is in the description. The cycles and timing that emerged revealed patterns beyond human planning. What had seemed like a series of random attacks and defenses was revealed to be part of a larger pattern of spiritual development that required these exact challenges to activate dormant aspects of your divine assignment. The opposition you faced hadn't been punishment or unfortunate circumstances, but the precise catalyst needed to reveal capabilities and authorities that couldn't have been accessed through comfort and ease. During this phase, the true scope of the conspiracy against you became clear. What you had initially perceived as individual jealousy or professional competition was revealed to be a coordinated campaign that extended across multiple spheres of your life simultaneously. The same people who were undermining your professional advancement were also working to disrupt your personal relationships. The individuals who were spreading false information about your character were the same ones attempting to interfere with your financial opportunities. The spiritual practitioners they had hired were operating in conjunction with workplace saboteurs and social manipulators in a synchronized assault designed to destroy every foundation of your stability and success, but the very comprehensiveness of their attack became the source of their undoing. When you began to see the connections between seemingly unrelated problems in different areas of your life, you gained a strategic understanding of spiritual warfare that transformed you from reactive victim to proactive victor. You stopped addressing each challenge as an isolated incident and began responding to the coordinated campaign with equally coordinated spiritual authority. The scattered defensive actions that had characterized your earlier responses gave way to systematic offensive operations that dismantled their entire network of opposition. Your opponents, in their unwitting service to this divine timing, had actually accelerated your spiritual growth and practical advancement by years or even decades. Their interference had forced you to discover resources and connections and internal strengths that might have remained hidden if your path had been smoother. Their spiritual attacks had activated protective and creative forces that were now permanently available for future challenges and opportunities. The spiritual inheritance that emerged demonstrated how divine favor operates across generations and communities. The spiritual rank you had accessed and demonstrated wasn't just individual achievement, but the claiming of an inheritance that belonged to all who shared your commitment to operating from divine rather than human systems. Your success became a demonstration to others that these higher frequencies were accessible to anyone willing to align with the requirements of spiritual maturity and divine purpose. The children in your sphere of influence began to display confidence and capabilities that exceeded what their age and experience would normally support. The young professionals who worked with you started receiving opportunities and recognition that accelerated their career development beyond normal timelines. The community organizations you supported experienced breakthroughs in funding, effectiveness, and public support that enabled them to expand their positive impact significantly. Your former opponents watched this expansion of blessing and favor with the recognition that they had been offered participation in something far greater than personal success or individual advancement. Their choice to operate from scarcity and opposition hadn't just cost them opportunities for their own growth, but had excluded them from being part of a movement that was creating positive change on a scale they hadn't imagined possible. The completion of generational cycles became evident as patterns of opposition and spiritual warfare that had affected your family lineage, your community, and even your professional field for generations were finally being broken through your willingness to stand in your spiritual rank rather than acquiesce to human systems that operated from limitation and control. The breakthrough you experienced in financial abundance wasn't just personal prosperity, but the interruption of generational patterns of scarcity that had limited your family's impact and influence for decades. The authority you gained in professional settings wasn't just career advancement, but the establishment of new standards for how leadership could operate from integrity and divine wisdom rather than manipulation and political maneuvering. The relationships you attracted weren't just personal fulfillment, but the creation of spiritual family connections that could support kingdom work across multiple spheres of influence. Your opponents found themselves confronting not just your individual spiritual rank, but the accumulated spiritual inheritance and authority of generations of faithful people whose prayers and sacrifices had prepared the way for this breakthrough. They had inadvertently chosen to oppose not just one person, but a spiritual legacy that had been building toward this moment of manifestation for far longer than any of them had been alive. The final understanding brought the revelation that had been building throughout this entire journey. Your spiritual rank wasn't something you had achieved or earned through your own efforts, but recognition from divine authority of who you had always been. The attacks you had faced, the protection you had experienced, the favor that had surrounded you, and the transformation that had occurred in your environment were all expressions of spiritual realities that existed before the conflict began and would continue long after your current opponents had faded into irrelevance. The person who had seemed so ordinary and approachable to those who thought they could manipulate or diminish you was actually someone whose identity was established in realms where their opinions and efforts carried no weight whatsoever. Your calm responses to their attacks hadn't come from conflict avoidance or people-pleasing, but from the deep knowing that their opposition was temporary interference with eternal realities that couldn't be altered through human effort or spiritual manipulation. As this understanding settled into your consciousness, the final transformation occurred. What had begun as defensive responses to external opposition became proactive expressions of divine authority and creative power. The spiritual rank that had protected you from attack now became the foundation for initiatives and influences that would impact far more people than had ever been involved in the original conflict. Your former opponents, those who remained aware of your trajectory, witnessed this transformation with the understanding that they had been present during the emergence of something significant in the spiritual realm. Some found the humility to acknowledge their error and seek reconciliation and learning. Others retreated into irrelevance, carrying the bitter knowledge that they had chosen opposition over participation when presented with authentic spiritual authority. But for you, chosen one, the real revelation was that this entire experience had been preparation rather than destination. Your spiritual rank, now fully activated and demonstrated, was the foundation for assignments and opportunities that would require everything you had learned about operating from divine favor rather than human systems. The protection you had experienced was preparation for greater exposure. The favor you had received was preparation for greater responsibility. The authority you had gained was preparation for greater service. The whispered conversations and behind-the-scenes plotting that had once threatened to derail your purpose had become the catalyst for revealing a spiritual rank that even you hadn't fully understood before it was tested. Their attempts to diminish your influence had instead established it on foundations that couldn't be shaken by any future opposition. Their efforts to limit your access to resources and opportunities had instead opened pathways to provision and favor that operated from sources they couldn't even perceive, much less interfere with. Standing now in the full knowledge of who you are and what you carry, you understand that every challenge was perfectly timed, every attack was precisely calibrated, and every victory was exactly what was needed to prepare you for the next level of your divine assignment. The spiritual rank they were unaware of until they tested it has become the foundation for everything that comes next in your journey of purpose and divine service.